Remember my first injection, they took me into this room. They gave me an orange to try inject. And it's like injecting into an orange. I can assure you, injecting yourself with that syringe is nowhere near the same as injecting an orange. I look at diabetes management now and think about where it was 27 years ago, and that amazing, the journey, opening an app on my phone or to having a pod and not having to have those syringes, and it's crazy. Type 1 diabetes can make you feel that you're almost like unlovable, because you can attach so many emotions to figures and numbers, and this number means I'm good, this number means I'm bad, this number means this number means that. Data tells us what we need to do next. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that makes so much sense. Best piece of advice I've received when living with type 1 diabetes came from a nurse. I was really struggling with burnout, and I remember in the appointment she said to me,
"Hi everyone, welcome to TypeCast Life Between the Lines, a diabetes podcast that goes beyond the target glucose. I'm your host, Natalie Balmain, winner of Channel 4's Make Me Prime Minister, Omnipod Ambassador, and General Do-Gooder of Diabetes. Juggling the ups and downs of diabetes can be challenging, so I'm here to connect you to some real people with real stories who all have one thing in common: type 1 diabetes. We'll be talking to some amazing guests over the course of this series, sharing laughs, tears, insights, and inspirational stories. So whether you're a seasoned pro or newly diagnosed, I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, you can make sure to watch, download, listen, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast app. I hope you enjoy the show. TypeCast, the podcast, features real stories from real people living with diabetes. But of course, none of this should be taken as medical advice. Always seek advice from your diabetes specialist team before making any changes. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of TypeCast Life Between the Lines. I'm your host, Natalie Balmain, and today I'm introducing a very special guest. So, having lived with type 1 for over 27 years, he's dedicated a huge proportion of his life to the advocacy space, including access to tech, equity of care, and diversity and inclusion. And we're going to dig into all of that. And whilst you might think that sounds like more than enough, he also found time this year to run the London Marathon. Now, I had the pleasure of introducing him a couple of years ago at TAD, so I know you guys are in for a treat today. Please, everybody welcome Dan Newman. Dan, thank you for being here.
thank you for having me. It feels a bit weird being on the other side.
Yeah, I know, because you're used to asking the questions.
Yeah.
Does it feel a bit uncomfortable?
A bit. But I will have to not slip into trying to ask you questions.
You're going to turn the tables on me.
Yeah. I'll try not to, but it'll be all right. I think I can.
You've given me the heads up now, so I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. I'll answer your question with a question, and then we'll go from there. But no, it'll be good. It'll be good. Thanks for having me.
I think, let's see how that goes.
It'll be good.
All right. So, Dan, tell us a little bit, because you were, if 27 years ago, you were a baby. What, 10?
Yeah.
11?
Yeah, I was 10 when I was diagnosed with type 1. I don't really remember too much about the days or the weeks up to it. All I remember is the day before. My aunt took myself and my cousins to the cinema. I was unwell, went back home, still unwell. My mum called the emergency GP, said you need to take him to A&E now, and that was it. Therefore, what seemed like an eternity, but a number of hours, and said you have diabetes, and that's all I really remember from the diagnosis.
So you say you felt unwell. Do you remember how you were feeling at all? Or
I just felt unwell. All I remember, and this is so random, is that what I remember from the day before is being laying in my nan's bed, because it was a summer holiday, so I was at my nan's, and just feeling unwell. Yeah. That's all I remember. And I can still remember my nan's bedroom, how it was all set up, but that's all.
It's interesting because, maybe you just, because you were 10, so you might not remember the specifics, but, even for me as somebody diagnosed at 20, I feel like the symptoms kind of crept up on me. So I didn't actually realise how unwell I felt, because they kind of like, they Trojan horsed me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd forgotten what normal felt like.
Yeah.
It was a gradual progression into going to the toilet loads
Yeah.
and my eyes getting blurry.
Yeah.
And nobody, and weight loss. And, but nobody said anything about
Yeah.
any of that stuff.
Yeah.
The first thing I remember anybody saying was, and my boyfriend at the time looked at me one day and he was like, "You've got too much makeup on. Your face is all grey and powdery."
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "I haven't got any makeup on." And then I'm thinking, why is my skin grey and powdery?
Yeah,
Like, this is weird. But yeah, I do distinctly remember going on injection going, "Oh, this is what normal feels like."
Yeah, I think so. What I do remember actually is being really thirsty at the time, and because it was the summer holidays and it was quite warm, I was drinking a lot of Ribena. I just remember it so vividly because it was like a 2 liter or a big bottle. That putting that in the cup with water, and I was constantly going to the cupboard at my nan's house because she used to have it locked away, and so I remember going, and I just remember just drinking a lot, and that's it from that lead up to the diagnosis. Life after diagnosis is a lot clearer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's probably part of the feeling unwell, isn't it? Is that haziness of not really sure what happened there, but I remember drinking a lot of water. That was one thing that I did kind of go, "Oh, I'm drinking a lot." And this is a bit silly, but I was like newly dating somebody at the time that I was falling ill. And he said to me afterwards, he was like, "I did think this girl's a bit weird. Like, why is she drinking that much water?" And one night I stayed over at his and I drank that much water, my stomach couldn't hold it. And I was like, "I'm going to be sick." And I had to run, and I just threw it all back up. And I was like, it's a bit weird. Like, but again, it's crept up on me. I didn't think anything of it. So the age is quite different.
Yeah.
Diagnosed at 10, obviously your mom is going to be really involved in your care at that point.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is something that you've talked about before. People do what they can with the tools that they have available.
Yeah.
But you were raised in a single parent household, is that right?
Yeah.
So, and do you have brothers and sisters?
I've got an older sister.
You've got an older sister.
Yeah.
So your mom had a lot on her plate.
Yeah.
Do you think like she was coping well with?
So I think when I was diagnosed, obviously it was in the mid to late 90s, and I look back and I think the way that health was spoken about back then, in comparison to the way that health is spoken about now, two completely different worlds. And obviously we now live in an age of Google, social media, whatever, to get information that you need. Whereas back then it was like dictionary and books, and you didn't have it was early stages of the internet, so you were very much relying on the healthcare professionals to provide that information to you.
And let's be honest, because even when I was diagnosed, which was a little bit later on, we were still being told things like pricking your finger 4 to 6 times a day is enough.
Yeah.
And what were the other things we were told? The only things that affect your glucose is food and exercise.
Yeah.
Which we now know.
Yeah.
There's way more to it.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that, because one thing that I remember so clearly from when I was really struggling, and we'll probably talk about it a bit more, but when I was struggling with my type 1 was around my pediatrician at the time said to me, "Oh, in the future, don't worry, you'll only have to test your levels once a week." And that's always stuck with me, because I look at where we are now.
Yeah.
And I remember that so clearly, that she said that to me. And I don't know if it was a way to kind of incentivize me to do more testing and think, in the future it'll be very different, because obviously, as we know, it's not. But also, when I was first diagnosed, I used, and I don't know, maybe I didn't have a monitor, so I know that I saw it online recently, they're called like chem strips.
Yes.
So you could only have a tube, and the scale on the tube was like 3, 7, 9, 13, 17. So that's how I used to measure my levels when I was first diagnosed. I didn't have a monitor, but I got one quite readily. But I remember that, and also in terms of injections, I didn't have a pen when I was first diagnosed. So I was using syringes and having to draw it up from vials, so that the orange cap syringes.
The orange cap
with this
syringes.
kind of thick steel.
I mean, I keep a few of those around as a last resort, but they are some.
Yeah.
Like the needles on those are.
Yeah, and
horrible.
so I remember, and so as I said, after diagnosis is very clear.
Yeah.
Remember my first injection. I was still on the ward. They took me into this room, and they're like, "Oh, it's." They gave me an orange to try inject, and they're like, it's like injecting into an orange. I can assure you, injecting yourself with that syringe is nowhere near the same as injecting an orange, not at all. And I was like, "You lied to me." Anyway, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think my mum did it, but I remember just that massive and all the time, and that was quite a regular thing until I got my pen. So I look at diabetes management now and think about where it was 27 years ago, and that amazing the journey, and having to wait a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever, to opening an app on my phone, or to having a pod and being able to, and not having to have those syringes, and it is incredible. It's crazy. But yeah, I just remember that from like the early years.
Yeah.
Such, so yeah.
So I mean, I remember when I was diagnosed, I didn't have to have syringes, thankfully, but I had the 8mm needles.
Yeah.
And I remember when they brought 4mm needles out, because it was a few years after my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I was covered in bruises. You know, I was younger. I was a skinny little thing. And I remember walking into the pharmacy one day, and the pharmacist, bless her, was so excited to tell me. She said, "You can get the 4mm ones now. Just tell them to change it on your prescription." And to go from 8mm to 4mm is a lot. It's half the size.
Yeah.
That was such I was so happy that day.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and and I think sometimes as well, that's something that only somebody else living with type 1 will understand, and it seems like such a small thing, and it is, but the mental, almost like relief and mental load that it takes away is huge.
Yeah.
But somebody be like, "Oh, it's only 4 minutes," but it's not just that. It's just that pain that you don't have. It's lessened the pain, and it's it's such a small thing, but it means so much to us.
I'm smiling,
do you know what I mean?
Because that's exactly how I put it when I talk to people. And my reason for saying that was when the sort of advent of CGM came. And I don't know if you experienced this, but it's certainly something I experienced before I changed hospitals and went to Manchester and Dr. Lala. Thank you, Dr. Lala. But I remember initial conversations where I was treated a bit like a kid who wanted the latest iPhone. And I'm like, this is nothing like a kid wanting the latest iPhone. You don't need an iPhone. And yes, okay, there are other ways of me doing this, but actually, I just want to improve my quality of life. I just want to take that mental burden. You might think it's not that bad, pricking your finger, it takes 2 seconds. That mental burden of having to do that constantly, if you take that away, that's a massive thing. Every finger prick might be small, but when you're doing it every hour, it builds up into a great big thing. And actually, that was my whole thing talking to clinicians, was like, don't talk to us like that, because none of us want to have type 1. None of us want to be having to ask for this tech in the first place.
Yeah. So my journey with CGM and Sense was very different. So I wasn't in a position to self-fund when they were first coming onto the markets and stuff. So I was reliant upon the NHS to get that. And I was also in a place where I wasn't really aware of what's going on when it was first coming up, because I had a period of time where I wasn't engaged with my type 1 diabetes and wasn't engaged with my team or anything like that. And that all changed in 2013. And I slowly became a bit more engaged and a bit more aware. And so I was just reliant upon when I was going to get that from the NHS, and asking and being told no, and then having a trial, and then being told, well, if this happens, then that. So it was very different for me. But when I had the trial, or when I went on to kind of the sensors, it's made a significant difference for me. And as I said, that there was the 2 minutes, and there was all that time ages ago, to now it's none of that. And small things again, like my fingertips, they were so like hard and just crusty from all the pricking, and now they're like normal, and they don't feel that way, and also like small, like what we said, the bruises that you mentioned, and even just looking at your fingertips at the time, and it's just a visual reminder of living with type 1 diabetes. And now there's another visual reminder, but it's not as kind of so visual as looking at all 10 things and just being like, so
because that is psychologically, it is different. When you see the marks on your fingers, that is a visible sign of trauma. Like we might wear medical tech now, but to me, that is an uplifting thing. I'm really proud of my tech because I'm like, this keeps me alive. This gives me a better quality of life. This has enabled my hair to grow again and my nails to grow again. So I see it differently.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
Yeah, of course. And I think that it's very much you have to find also as well find the joy in certain things, and you should feel comfortable wearing. If you've got tech, you should feel comfortable wearing your tech with pride and see it as a way of very much, and most people do, it's a way of helping you. And maybe some people don't have that point of comparing what it was before, and I think most people, but that kind of is tech, appreciate and be happy that you've got it. And totally
like we've both said, it's come such a long way. And from us having to carry around a load of kit. And
also with all of that stuff, and I'm trying not to be stereotypical here, but for me as a man, I would, if I'm going, I would try to have to stuff everything in my jeans pockets. And they're just bulky because I had a pen, I had the pot with the sensors, I had my Lancet, and I had my monitor. As well as having the phone, as well as having my wallet and my keys. So it was just, where does it kind of...
You're reminding me of that viral picture. The 4 guys in tight jeans.
That wasn't... No. That wasn't me. I know which one you're talking about.
They've recreated it, but they all wear baggy jeans. They've done the same.
But around this time, this was where... I'm aging myself here. But it's where... You would wear baggy jeans.
But I'm from that era too.
Yeah.
I never left that era. I'm really happy because I've become fashionable again.
But it's crazy how fashion goes like full circle. And I know. Yeah.
We'll move on. We'll move on. But you did say something before that I want to dig into a little bit. I think you said 2013. Now, this is something I've heard, and I've chatted to a lot of people where there was a period where they didn't engage with their own type 1. And then I think you said around that time, it changed. Why? Why did it change? What happened?
I was working at JDRF, who are now known as Breakthrough T1D or Breakthrough T1D, formerly known as...
the artist formerly known
whatever as. And so that was key for me because it was the first time I'd been in an environment where near enough everyone around me knew about type 1 diabetes. I had colleagues living with type 1 diabetes. And it was just a safe space for me. Before going into working there, I had an environment where I was in a working environment where my type 1 diabetes wasn't understood as well as it could have and should have been. And it was very early on in my career as well. And going from that environment to working at JDRF was just key for me, and it just being there and being exposed to information that I'd never heard of before, and just understanding about the research and what was happening and all of this work going into the world of type 1 was just it was life-changing for me.
So did you set out to work? You were like, I want to try and work in the diabetes space. Was that
No. My profession, I'm a HR manager. So HR is my profession. And I happened to connect with the HR officer at the time on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, diabetes, HR, diabetes, HR.
Things in common.
Connect. And then I saw that he posted the job that he was leaving. So I thought, oh, let me apply. So, and even up until, I'd never heard of JDRF.
Wow.
And so it was just applying, and obviously got the job. And yeah, it was just really transformational for me and my management, and just feeling quite almost content in the workplace that I think this is another thing as well, is that I could just show up as Daniel.
As authentically you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not have to think about like, oh, I'm Daniel, but there's type 1. Or and that was just a really nice environment to be in, and that's what I needed at the time. And a lot of just having my colleagues understanding what type 1, and even seeing colleagues do injections at the desk, and it was just normal in that environment. And that's what that version of me back then needed to overcome everything that I'd faced, and to kind of keep moving forward.
And that is such a powerful point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, I probably in almost every single episode of this that I've done, I've talked about peer support.
Yeah.
And sometimes people go, oh, well, that's nice, having a buddy. I cannot undervalue just what a huge impact peer support has. And I don't think anyone can explain it better than it.
And it didn't even end there. So one of my colleagues, she was very key into me moving on to an insulin pump. I saw how she was managing type 1 with this, and she was talking to me every day. You should get an insulin pump. You should get an insulin. Have you got an insulin? Not at the start, but further in a number of years. And I was, yeah. And then eventually I had the conversation with my consultant, and the ball started to roll from there. And so peer support there was key for me. And I genuinely can't thank her enough for giving me that push that I needed to go down the path of having an insulin pump, and how life-changing being on the pump has been for me.
Yeah.
But then had I not worked there, I wouldn't have I might have at some point, but I probably wouldn't have. And partly one of the reasons that it's just come to my mind is when I was, I think 15 or 16, or 14 to 16, I was told that if I didn't look after myself better, I'd have to go on an insulin pump. And so from that point there, an insulin pump had always been, I'd associated
with failure.
Yeah, if you're only a bad diabetic if you have an insulin pump.
Yeah.
It had never been sold to me, and nobody had ever had a conversation with me to change my mind of thinking that you're only a bad diabetic. You're a bad diabetic if you have an insulin pump. I know that's not the case now. And I don't think any diabetes tech solution should be sold as you're not doing well. It should be sold as what we spoke about earlier on, about the positive, and actually it's here to help you. And I'd carried that for so many years, and it took my colleague talking to me to change my mindset from how it was.
And isn't that just so profound? And, I think a message to all healthcare professionals: listen, all of us are humans, and all of us have bad days and days where we're not on our game.
Yeah.
But you're on a, if you don't look after yourself, you will be on a pump. 12 words that had an effect on you for years afterwards, and was a barrier to you making progress to help yourself. And that's...
Yeah, and but also, I know I'm not the only person who's probably had that experience. Mm-hmm. There are many other people out there who have had that same experience, and language matters, and it does. But I've been very fortunate that I've had that experience, but I've also had the other side of being able to go away from it and to change my mindset. But what if you don't have that experience, and you're out there and you're still living your life based on what you were told back then, and you haven't challenged that?
Yeah, and I'm sure
information.
There's a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
So hopefully they're listening and they can be inspired by that. So 2013, joined JDRF, started to look after yourself. What point did you start doing the advocacy?
that was so that was 2018, but the lead up to that point also started in 2013.
Okay.
So in 2013, and I will talk about it a bit more, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, most likely a complication of type 1 diabetes, and probably linking back to my earlier management when I wasn't really engaged. So I had that, I started JDRF, and then a few months later, I had that diagnosis.
That's a
And
real
then,
roller coaster.
Yeah, it was. And I think as well, because I was working there, I internalized extra pressure because I was, oh, you're a diabetes charity, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But that was all on me. And then over the next 4 or 5 years, I was just managing the chronic kidney disease as well as managing type 1 diabetes. In 2018, I had a kidney transplant from a live donor, and I've never been on dialysis. And again, very fortunate. I worked up until the Monday before my operation because in my mind, I was like, there's no way I'm going to work. I'm going to work. I'm going to do. I just had that mindset of I'm going to work and I've got this, whatever, I'm going to work, because I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And there are things that I was still doing even up until my transplant that the doctors were surprised that I was still doing. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to, that was just my mindset of that. But
I do think that's a common thing in a lot of people who live with type 1 is that stoicism.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, life gets tough, I'm going to get tougher.
But you have to, and this is that you have to have it, but I make it sound so easy because it's not easy.
No.
Because I've went through like so many failures, and I was just type 1 diabetes has taken a lot away from me as an individual, and I've gone through so much to be able to get to a place where I've taken it back from type. So my life has type 1 diabetes, not type 1 diabetes control. So but it takes a long time to get there, and I know that, and I just know it, and I'd never forget how I was before, and know that I can always go back to that.
Yeah.
And that's partly what shapes my advocacy, but also just what started that was going through the transplant and realizing I've gone through so much with this condition. I felt alone at so many points. I felt like I failed the test. There were so many things that I felt, and I thought, if I feel that way, there must be others out there who feel that same way. And I wouldn't want anyone to feel how I felt, because it's not nice. We've spoken about language. We've spoken about the impact of language. We've spoken about so many things, and I just didn't want anyone to feel that way. And that's when I thought, let me start sharing my journey living with type 1. And also, not just the good stuff, but the not so good stuff. And I don't want to label it as bad, but the not so good stuff and
the real stuff.
Yeah,
the real stuff.
Yeah, and that was kind of key for me, because there is you do need to have a level of positivity.
Yeah,
but also there's real life stuff that happens, as I've given the example, and we need to be talking about that stuff in a way that isn't a way of scaring people. I'm not saying go out and get all the complications in the world, far from it. But what I am saying is, if that you're living with type 1 and we're having conversations about complications, that it's done in a way that if you find yourself at that point, you don't feel scared, you don't feel like you failed the test, you don't feel alone. You just feel that this condition has knocked me, and now this condition has given me this. I have to manage it, but I'm not alone, because there's a community that can help me. There are healthcare professionals that can help me, rather than you're just a failure. And also, sorry, I'm going. I know I'm going.
No, I'm sat here because I love listening to you. I always love listening to you, because the way that you say it is super inspiring. It is super comforting. You are comforting in the way that you talk about things. And no, I'm just.
And then I just want the one is that, and I make it sound so easy, and it's not easy, because you also have to forgive yourself from the past, and you have to get to a point of thinking, oh, what if only I did this? If only I did that. And I did that for so many weeks and months, and I got to a point where I was like, you can't change the past. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You have to deal with your reality, and you have to forgive yourself for how you were in the past, and know that that's not you anymore. and that's okay because you're in a better place now. So you're in a better place managing type 1 diabetes. You might not be in a better place physically, but you can't change that.
I mean, I think that's true of everybody, even people who don't live with type 1. You know, it's a lot of people ravage their health with various things that they struggle with. Food, drugs, alcohol, whatever their thing might be. And it's probably a lot of other people who might think, yeah, I need to forgive myself for that. It's given me whatever it's given me, or challenges that, but bullying yourself doesn't help, does it? You know,
No.
you've still got to look after yourself.
Yeah.
And in order to look after yourself, you've got to love yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, you do. And I think that type 1 diabetes is a way that the condition in itself can make you feel that you're almost like unlovable, because you can attach so many emotions. And I did this as well. I attached so many emotions to figures and numbers, and this number means I'm good, this number means I'm bad, this number means this number means that. And I remember when I was working at JDRF, went to a discovery day, and it was in Kent. And I remember it clearly because there was a mum of I think her son had type 1, and she said that we just view data, we view the information as data, and it just tells us what we need to do next. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that makes so much sense.
That's really nice.
And from that moment on, I didn't, and I still don't attach my worth as a person to the numbers on the screen based on what she said, because I'm like, it's just telling me what I need to do next.
Yeah.
And again, as I mentioned, I spent so many years doing that. I'm not going back there again. But again, it's easier said than it's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But you have to not do it as well. But it's so easier said than done. But type 1 is in a way where it can do that. And if you're hearing messages of saying you're not doing well, you're not doing this, you just internalize those messages as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a long time, I'm better at it now, but people would always say, oh, you're so positive about it. And yes, I do like to inspire people with hope and positivity, but actually what was lying beneath it was that I didn't want to talk about the negative stuff because I didn't want to admit it to myself in my own head.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, if I just talk about the positive stuff, then it's all positive and, la, la, la. And that was me not dealing with the badness that I'd attached and the shame that I'd attached to certain numbers, or not having this HbA1c or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it's just so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think we can. Mental health is important for everybody in order to live your life well. But when you have to self-manage a condition constantly, like I said before, you've got to care about yourself.
Yeah, you do. And don't get me, I have my down days as well. And I've experienced diabetes burnout for a number of years. And so I know what that is like. And I don't say all of this to be just like, it's not. I've been like there. I've been down in the train. I know what that is like. And now if I feel that burnout is creeping up on me, I just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I know what it is. And then I realize, actually, maybe instead of trying to fight it, I might have to just sit with this for a little bit to get myself back to where I need to be.
Yeah.
And that's okay as well, because if I don't do that and I just suppress it, I'm going to be worse off further down the line. And even coming out of burnout, and some things that I say to people is that if you're struggling, then just set yourself small goals. And even if it is, and just being realistic, even say you're not checking your levels as often as you should, even if you go into the app once a day, that's so much better than not doing it.
That's it.
And you have to build up quite slowly. And that's the reality of coming out of burnout, is that you're not going to go from burnout to perfect, or not perfect, but burnout to where you want to be in a day. It just takes it takes time, and you have to build and just celebrate the small wins.
That's it. And remember that nothing is final. Yeah. You know, you're going to get burnt out. And then you are going to get better again. Yeah. And then you're maybe going to get burnt out again a little bit further down the line. Yeah. And it's just about like
Yeah.
you said, acknowledging it, letting it wash over you, and going, okay, we've been here before.
Yeah.
We
But-
know the drill.
And it links back to what I talk about, just normalizing that not so nice side of type 1. But although conversations are changing, we're not there yet, because I'm not saying you shouldn't fear burnout, but if you get there, that's when you need that most comfort around you. It's like with anyone. If you talk about mental well-being, mental health, is that when you're at perhaps a crisis stage, the last thing you want is to somebody to batter you that when you're already down. You want, and most people need, just that comfort.
Yeah.
So why not with diabetes, burnout, and why not? And there's so much going on in the condition, that particularly burnout, just that's when people need that comfort. But you hear the messages of, oh, you're not doing well, you're not doing this, you're not. People don't want to hear that, but we internalize those messages, and I've internalized them. But I've been able to work through that, and just hope others can do that if they ever find themselves in.
And I think that's what's so super inspiring about you, because you are so authentic, and that you talk about the challenges and the burnout and, you know, your chronic kidney disease and all of those things. And for a lot of people, if they were facing that, they might go, that's it. It's all hope is lost.
Yeah.
So to then talk about the fact that you ran the London Marathon this year, I don't think there's a better way of showing people that hope is not lost. So what inspired you to want to do it? Why do it? Why challenge yourself in that way?
Okay.
How? I've got so many questions.
So, maybe can I just throw in a caveat here?
Yeah.
I was running before running became this thing on social media. I'm just gonna put that there. It's just there.
There we go. You heard it here first.
To date stamp it, I started running in August 2022, and the reason why I started is because it goes back to my transplant, and it's the transplant was such a significant moment in my life, because it changed my outlook on many things, and particularly health-wise. And even with a transplant, it's not a cure. It's like it's not a cure, but it's the best form of treatment. And so I have to manage this organ as best as I could. And I always wanted to do running and kind of exercise, but I'd never done it. And then August 2022, I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm going to do I saw in my local area, I had a magazine come through, and there was a park run at the park.
Nice.
Local park. So I was like, oh, do you know what? I probably can't run 5K, but I can walk it. So I'm just going to walk it. I went there, walked the first one. I was like, oh, that's all right. Let me go back next Saturday. Walked, did a bit more running. I was like, oh, that's all right. And then gradually the running increased and the walking decreased, until the first time I ran round, did 5K without stopping. I was over the moon. I was over the moon of just, wow, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then I just kept going park run for consistently over the weeks, because I was just really, it was almost like the highlight of my week is just going running. Like, well, a run, I can do 5K, or I can go faster. So I'm very competitive, and I was super competitive with myself to beat my time. I realize now, being running for, but it's not realistic to do that. But I was it got to the point where if I didn't beat my time, I wasn't enjoying the fact that I just run 5K. I was like, why didn't you get the time from last week? So I had to settle down and be like, and just
competitiveness.
Dan, you couldn't even run 5K a few months ago. Just calm down.
Yeah.
And then from there, actually, again, links back to JDRF, and also I was part of the diabetes football community. So I know you've spoken to Chris Bright.
Yeah.
And we were talking at a JDRF event at the University of Westminster, I think early 2023. And there was a mum there who was with her son, who's living with type 1 diabetes. And I started speaking to them. And I know you mentioned about diversity and inclusion, and as much as I like to speak to everyone living with type 1 diabetes, particularly if I see somebody from an ethnic minority background, I will make sure that I speak to them, because I remember when I was growing up, I didn't see anyone who looked like me living with type 1, or anyone close to looking like me living with type 1. So I now know that almost like I'm in that position.
Yeah.
So let me go and speak to whoever it is to say, I've been living with type 1 for so many years. So I started speaking to them, and it turns out that I was already following a running club community on Instagram. And I was thinking about going because it wasn't too far, but I was like, oh, I don't know. Turns out she was part of the running club, and said to me, you should come down. And so then I was like, oh, I know somebody there. So I went there, and just from there, that whole running community, running club, has just been amazing, and just accepting of just living with type 1. There'll be questions, but it's just been, and from there, that's what led me to wanting to do the marathon. So I did my first 10K in July 2023. I was like, oh, that's all right. My first half marathon in September 2023. I could probably do a marathon. And then it got to January 2024, and had the opportunity to apply for the London Marathon place through my running club or running crew community, and managed to get it. So
wow,
it was that moment meeting my friend at the JDR at that event, and joining the running community, and just being around really inspiring people, just regular everyday people. Okay, they're not living with type 1 diabetes, but they show what's possible, and it makes me realize, oh, if they can do it, I can do it, but I just have to have extra planning. So in my training runs for the marathon, that was more about fueling and how I'm going to fuel the marathon, hypos treatment, how I'm going to manage that, all of that stuff. And I had to think about that from the start. Whereas perhaps if you're not running with type 1 diabetes, you have to think about fueling, but it's not a key point for you. And and also going into the marathon as well, I everything's on me. So I wouldn't want to be running the marathon and thinking, say I went hypo, but I didn't have enough hypo treatment. I wouldn't want to be in that position, because it's on me to manage my condition the best that I can. And it was just a really great opportunity to just run around London with loads of people on the street. And if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Well, I was going to say, it's an incredible achievement for anybody, any able-bodied person. So, just massive congratulations on doing it with type 1 and a new kidney.
Yeah. Interestingly, the whole thing is that managing the chronic kidney is very different to managing running with type 1. Is the kind of at the forefront of my mind when I run, whereas it's about making sure you're hydrated.
Just hydrated.
Yes. But if I can run a marathon, anyone can run a marathon. Like I genuinely believe that. You just have to prepare and just take the small steps. A bit like when I mentioned about burnout, it's that same process of small steps, and slowly you gradually build and build and build. Yeah. And
let's face it, I mean, pretty much every part of living with type 1 is about planning and preparation. So it's just that.
Yeah.
For a separate activity. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, congratulations, Dan. Thank you so much. I'm not going to let you run away, though. We're going to have a short break, and then we are going to come back and do some more light-hearted stories, if that's okay.
Yeah, all good.
Lovely. All right, everybody, we're going to take a short ad break, and then I'm going to be back with Dan for some fun stories and quick-fire questions. Since being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes back in 2007, I was determined not to let it get in the way of me living my life. But of course, living with diabetes is hard. You're doing the job of a pancreas. Now, I'd seen insulin pumps before, but I'd never really thought of myself as a pump person. Then in 2018, I discovered there was a tubeless pump called Omnipod, and I jumped at the chance to give it a try. Using Omnipod gives me all the benefits of an insulin pump, but the freedom of living without tubes. I can use the bolus calculator to help me work out my doses. I can bolus discreetly at a restaurant without having to go to a bathroom to do an injection. I can wear what I want without worrying about sticking tubes and an end of a pump up my dress somewhere. And all of this with the added benefit of one cannula insertion every 3 days instead of multiple injections a day. Now, I know that changing therapy can be daunting, but in my experience, when I moved to Omnipod, my only thought was, why didn't I do this sooner? So if you're thinking about giving Omnipod a go, you can order a pod experience kit from omnipod.com/typecast and give it a try today. The link is also in the bio. Now, back to the show. Hi everyone, welcome back. And we are here with Dan Newman. We've talked about a huge amount of things today, everything from complications to advocacy. But after the break, as you know, we like to go down the slightly more light-hearted route. So let's talk about families, because I know you have a very cute nephew. And I know that you've talked to him about your tech and things like that. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about, how do you talk to young children in your family about things like type 1, living with type 1?
Yeah, so put it maybe in my neck. The question is more like, they can see the text, so it's like, what's that?
Yeah.
Which is obviously a valid question. And so the questions that he had, he's 9, 10. I think he's 9. What? He's 9 or 10. One of the two.
They're always babies, nieces
he's
and
one
nephews.
of the,
They stay small in your mind forever.
He's one of the two.
I've got a nephew who's like 20 now. And a few years ago, we were at a family party and I saw him walk up to the bar and I was about to go and tell him off. And then I was like, no, you are old enough to be at the bar.
Yeah. So
he's still 9 in my head.
So so kind of with him and stuff, he will ask about my tech, and he asked me what it was. So particularly my sensor, and just explaining in kind of basic terms what it does and why I need to have it, and talking a bit more. I don't talk about like beta cells and that's, but it's more like I can't produce or my body doesn't make insulin, and just keeping it very not lighthearted, but very basic and just age appropriate. And I found out that after the weekend after he first saw my sensor, he went to school and he was telling his friends that, oh, my uncle's a superhero. He has this thing on his arm, and so it was just his way of making sense of my world and what tech is and how he sees it.
But that was actually an incredibly insightful viewpoint from a 9 or 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Because actually it's the way that I describe it to people. We've talked a lot about feelings of shame, that it's a vulnerability or a weakness, but that's not how I like to describe it to people, because of nearly all, and yes, okay, there are always going to be people who are struggling. There are always going to be people who are just at this point in time trying to get out of bed and make it through the day. But there are also a huge proportion of the type 1 community who are doing all kinds of incredible things. Modelling, acting, running marathons, doing reality shows, performing, all things that are impacted by life with type 1. And they're really successful at it. And so my viewpoint to people has always been, well, actually, we're kind of superheroes because we're doing everything you guys are doing, but we started the race 5 steps behind you. Yeah. So who's really like? Yeah. So that, to see it like that as a 9 or 10-year-old is an incredible thing.
Yeah, no, he's a good kid.
He's good. He's a good kid. All right, so carrying on in the light-hearted part of the episode, I've got some quick-fire questions for you if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Okay, have a little look under the table. You will find some cards. What I would like you to do is, they should be in order, I hope. I'd like you, when I ask you the question, to both say your answer but also hold it up. They're double-sided pieces of cards, so you just hold up your answer for the cameras, please.
Cool.
Okay, we're coming in strong.
Okay.
Pump or MDI?
Pump.
Yeah, I don't think anybody said MDI.
But also, I would, and I guess maybe, I know I'm on a pump, but also shout out to the MDI crew because.
I mean, yeah, they are. They're doing their thing.
Yeah.
Doing their thing.
Yeah,
just doing their thing.
Shout out to them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Finger pricks or CGM?
CGM. I'm supposed to look at you and I say, well,
no,
the camera would be like...
Yeah, go on. You can look at the camera.
Game show.
I'm going to have a conveyor belt for you next. You have to remember
I feel like I'm on
the
the game show. I'm living my generation.
Generation game.
Bruce Forsyth, we're showing our age.
Shout out Brucey's bonus.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Phone or text?
Oh, do you mean phone call? Or
yeah. You a caller or a texter?
No.
You're not a caller?
No. And I'm one of those ones, I will look at you call.
No,
I will wait until it goes off.
Have you ever done it where you've pulled your phone out of your pocket, somebody's calling you, and you're looking at it and you're like, I really hope they're not on the other side of the street watching me do this?
I haven't, but it could have happened.
That's the way my brain works.
No, I just text and
yeah,
just text.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I will look and
yeah. And the great thing about text is like you don't even really have to open it. You can just flick your notification down and go, yeah, I'm not going to read all of that.
Maybe I can't expose myself too much. Maybe not.
Okay, less said about that, better. Insta or TikTok?
Insta. Yeah. I like TikTok, but I also like a break from videos.
Yeah.
I like just pictures.
Yeah.
I'm a simple.
I like photography.
Simple guy. Yeah.
I like to read. I'd prefer to have a caption than to have somebody.
Yeah.
Also, I just don't like having my volume on my phone all that much. So videos are kind of like, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Insta.
I agree with you there. Okay, high or low?
As in
blood's high or blood's low. Yeah, honestly, I know it's not nice. Neither are nice, but you've got to pick one. That's the game.
You know, it would be low, only because you get to eat.
Yeah.
But if I had to live with the feeling of feeling low or live with the feeling of feeling high, it would be low. When I get high, I just feel terrible.
Yeah.
Same. Everything just feels stuffy and
also it's like I feel like you can come out of a low quicker.
Yeah.
Coming down from a high, and it just.
And so there's that side of low all the way.
Yeah. Okay. Juice or sweets?
Depends.
Okay.
If I'm running, sweets because it can be easier.
Yeah.
To
carry around. Yeah.
But then also juice because sometimes.
I love a juice. I do. I love a juice.
Yeah.
Okay. Crocs or not?
I don't have a pair. I don't have any strong feelings about Crocs. But I don't dislike them enough to be like...
You're just indifferent. I think that's the most scathing insult you could give them. I'm just indifferent.
I'll go Crocs because people have told me that they're really comfortable. Particularly after you run a marathon. That's what I've heard.
Okay. So they have their uses.
Yeah, I'll support my running people.
Okay.
Crocs all the way.
They were originally invented as a boat shoe. That's why they have holes in to let the water come out.
I know that when you put the thing down, the strap at the back, they call that sports mode.
Sports mode? Apparently you can like it's an Audi.
Yeah. That's what I've been told. But I don't have a pair. But
their marketing people are genius. Okay, last one. HbA1c or time in range?
Time in range.
And want to expand your thinking on that?
So, 2 weeks. The first week, so many years of my years living with type 1 diabetes, so focused on HbA1c. But actually, I feel that with time in range, it gives a better, for me anyway, it gives a clearer picture of how I'm actually doing, and it's more the day-to-day rather than the average. And with your HbA1c, it's easy. Not actually, I was going to say, I'm not. With HbA1c, it doesn't necessarily show the full picture. And whereas for me, time in range.
Yeah, I mean, it only takes one number to skew an average, right?
Yeah.
That's how statistics work.
Yeah, and you could be really low, then high, then low, then high.
And the average works out perfect.
Yeah. whereas I feel time in range gives a better picture.
Okay, so we always like to finish our podcasts on a positive note.
I like what you did there.
Thanks.
I feel like there should be.
I know. I need a house band.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can do things like badum-cha and like flashback noises.
Speak to the organisers. Yeah.
There we go. We're getting an in-house band for the next one.
Yeah.
So, would you like to share some positive thinking with us? Whether that's your best motivational quote, or maybe some advice that you might give to younger you or newly diagnosed person.
So in terms of advice, the best piece of advice that I've given when it comes to I've received when living with type 1 diabetes came from a nurse. Her name's Debbie Hicks. I was really struggling with burnout, and I remember in the appointment she said to me, and I wasn't testing or checking my levels or doing any of that stuff, and she said, trying to manage your type 1 diabetes without checking your levels is like trying to drive looking in the rearview mirror.
Wow.
And obviously, but she kind of framed it. She was like, "Oh, do you drive?" I was like, "Yes."
Yeah.
And then when she said that, and that hit home more than anything, because it just made me think, actually, you wouldn't do that. So why are you doing it here? Like, you can't drive looking in your rear view, so you can't. And it just hit home for me. And then in terms of the motivational quote, there's he's not alive anymore, but his name's Jim Rohn, and he does done a lot of talks around motivational speaking, and he has a quote which says, the key to a better future, the key to your better future is you. And so that just reminds me that if I need to change anything in my life, whether it be type 1 related, work related, habit related, whatever it is, it's all on me. And I can easily blame everyone else, but it's not on somebody else to change me, it's on me to change me. And also just reminds me that I'm kind of in control of what environments I put myself in, what environments I don't put myself in, but ultimately, what do I want my better future to be? And that's that. So, yeah, that advice changed, but both sets.
Both of those are just incredibly powerful. I'd not heard that one before that the nurse shared. That's a really nice way of putting it. And like we said, words are powerful.
Yeah.
And somebody can say something that can negatively impact someone for years, and on the flip side, somebody can say something so simple that it actually turns your life around. Yeah. So I think loads of people are going to be really inspired to hear that. So thank you for sharing that with us, Dan, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you. I managed to ask you, and
you did,
and be the podcast.
I got away lightly there, so, I think.
Yeah,
I did. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and you've been an absolutely incredible guest. I'm sure everybody's really enjoyed seeing you and hearing from you today. And if they'd like to know a bit more about you, where can they find you on socials?
So you can find me on Instagram mainly, so at T1D_Dan, the same handle on Twitter. And if you haven't got tired of hearing my voice, but you also get to hear my voice and other people's voices, you can find me or search for the Talking Type 1 podcast.
The Talking Type 1 podcast.
Wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And if you've enjoyed listening to Dan today, make sure you subscribe to our channel for more amazing content like this. And of course, if you would like to appear on an episode of TypeCast, you can email us at typecast@insulet.com with your name, age, location, and what you'd like to talk about. And of course, if you'd just like to share a funny story with us, please do get in touch on our email or socials. And you never know, we might read one out. And until next time, guys, keep looking after yourselves. You're doing great.